while we're working on that, oh, there it is. Never mind. I was going to say while we're trying to find my name hidden down there in the list, I'd say hello and who I am really quickly. For people who don't know, my name is Benzing. I work as a consultant at a little company called TrueSec. Specifically, I work in cybersecurity incident response. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about patching with you guys today, and patching in kind of this weird world that we are in today. So about 12 months ago or so now, this strange thing happened where all the devices that we were used to being able to manage on-prem all of a sudden just kind of picked up and left. They went home, picked up, gone. Desktops, laptops, everything just picked up and gone. All of a sudden we had ghost towns and cubes everywhere. And what ended up happening as a result of that is that a lot of companies were basically in one of three scenarios. We had a group of companies, customers, as well as just other people that I've talked about there, that were in three possible different scenarios. We had a group of companies that were the prepared, right? Organizations who were fortunate enough to be cloud native organizations, or organizations who had a way to monitor and manage remote devices regardless of what network those devices were on. They had a way to get to them, they could see them, they had some format of line of sight to those devices. Then we had kind of a secondary group, which was a group of devices that were in the state of almost ready. They were almost ready for something like this happening, which were organizations who had the ability to manage devices. Sometimes they would sometimes come up, they would pop up here and there, they would maybe be a VPN thing, they would be on for a couple hours here, a couple hours there, but you could at least get policy to them. Or maybe it was users that still had the ability to come back into the office, or people who shipped a switch to that user's home, and they had the ability to get on that way as well. And then last but not least, we have the not so much prepared, or the now what bucket, as I like to call it. So quick show of hands, was anybody in the sad bucket of the now what bucket? If anyone wants to raise their hand here, anybody had the unfortunate enough to that? Okay, good. I didn't see any hands go up, so that's good. So I have come across a few of those. The worst case out of I did see one. The worst that doesn't want to admit it one. No. The worst ones out of that, though, were the organizations that had something that happened in the middle of that, which is all their devices went home, and then the infrastructure got ransomware, or got encrypted, or got destroyed. How do you get back? How do you get devices back into management, or how do you get them back to where you can patch from that? So let's talk about what our options are for patching. And so this is geared a little bit towards, everybody here based on what level of CM you've done. So bear with me for people who know about these, and for those who don't, here's a learning chance. So our first option is the Intune only bubble. The Intune only bubble it's fantastic. It's great. If you are one of the companies or one of the admins that is able to do Intune only, major props. The big benefits of that is you have no reliance on on-prem infrastructure. That means you don't have to worry about if you have something like the previously mentioned Azure outage or anything like that happened last year. There's no worrying about that. There's no worry that maybe its connection back to on-prem breaks or something like that. The only thing you have to worry about is making sure you have the ability to get to those clients from Azure or access to a web page. Your devices are always in a managed state. Doesn't matter what internet connection they connect to, as long as they can get on the internet and as long as they can hit that Azure management page, they're managed. You can reach them, you can configure them and change them. Sure, there's some, things that maybe aren't as flexible or maybe not as granular as you might want them to be, or maybe you don't get quite as much data as you necessarily want to get, but they are in some part of being managed. And then last but not least, and this is kind of a big one, is feature updates. Something that isn't been or hasn't been on a lot of people's radars and is just now starting to surface is the fact that all these devices went home back 10 months ago or so, give or take, right? I think February of last year. I was on the last flight that I did for work was something like February last year, and then I was grounded, no more flights. So pretty close to 11 months. Well, that means we're coming up close on feature update time. We've got devices that, especially organizations that were on previous ones, how do we upgrade? If you're Intune only, doing updates and doing feature updates is probably pretty easy because you've probably already kicked a lot of the major roadblocks out of the way. So what about option number two? Another one of the options that we saw, or CLC out there for these prepared organizations, is the Cloud Management Gateway. Again, we've got devices that are always managed, whether they're on-prem, not on-prem, on VPN. Again, as long as there's internet, the device is managed. And that's the key thing here for patching, is the device needs to be in some type of a managed state. Now, one of the things about this is it does require the on-prem infrastructure. Not necessarily a bad thing, depending on what you have, especially if you still have on-prem servers that you need to manage. And there is, of course, a cost associated with it. Talk a little bit more about that later, though. And then last, but certainly not least, in fact, one of my favorite ones that we've been doing a lot of lately is co-management. Again, we get devices always managed for specific things, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. It's probably the easiest out of these three to set up. Intune has some challenges, especially if you're trying to move to Intune only, because you got to make sure that you can check all the checkboxes for management, that you can actually get there and not be relying on something that helps support some legacy operating systems or legacy things or older style things in your environment. But it does still have the requirement of having on-prem infrastructure and the ability for those clients to be able to get back and talk to that on-prem infrastructure. So for those companies that were a year ago, I want to talk through a couple of different scenarios, and let's see if this resonates with anybody here that, about 10 months ago, maybe this was you. Let's see, show of hands, if in scenario one, you had MemCM installed in your environment, you had a configuration manager environment, and you had always on VPN, and you always had line of sight to those devices, and that's how you manage devices. Well, it's config manager and through VPN when they were off wandering around. Nobody or nobody's brave enough to raise their hand. Oh, there's 1, 2, 3. Yep. There we got some more coming up in there. So there's a few people out there. They had always on or some similar type of a always on VPN solution that was floating around out there. And then we kind of have scenario 2, which was more common. And let's go ahead and get another round of raising of hands here, which was MemCM was installed or config manager was installed, and there was a user-initiated VPN. That's Cisco AnyConnect, Windows VPN, where you actually have to go ahead and go in and click it, Pulse Secure, all those other different Citrix NetScaler stuff. Yep, there go the numbers. That's where the numbers are. That's where most everybody is at. Yep, 17, 18. We're getting close to, I think, 20% of the room here now. And then, of course, we have scenario number 3, which is MemCM is installed, and I know this is a little weird. No VPN is available. Devices are registered, and Intune patching rings for whatever reason aren't allowed for reasons. And there's still 2 hands in there. There might be some people from earlier, but I've actually seen a couple of these before where for whatever reason they had it installed, they registered the devices in Intune because they were thinking someday they might do some things with Intune, but hadn't started doing anything yet because of politics, shall we say. So with that all being said, though, how do we move if we're in scenario 2 or if we're in scenario 1? How do we move? How difficult is it to move to something like co-management? I said it was easy, right? And I'm sure if you've ever seen any of the promotional stuff around it, you've seen the just 4 clicks or just this, that, and the other thing. How easy is it? So easy, it's a 5-minute video. It's actually about a 7-minute video, give or take. I have a recording of this. I will make sure that I get this over along with this presentation and slide deck for it. But I'm going to go ahead and do it. And that way, if it goes wrong horribly here, we still have a video that we can fall back to later. So, pull this up. You see I have my Shiny Lab here. You can see I've deleted co-management for my environment. It normally has co-management up and running. We're going to go ahead and right-click and do some configure co-management. Wait a second here. I've got my Azure Public Cloud because I use the Azure Public Cloud. I'm not a government entity or anything like that. Go ahead and click my shiny sign in button. And log in. Now it does know who I am, and I logged in here earlier today, so let's see if I get yelled at. Nope, still has my session. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say upload to Microsoft Endpoint Manager Admin Center. Seems reasonable to me. I love using the tenant attach options and features for it. I'm actually going to talk a little bit about that in a second. I'm going to go ahead and enable automatic client enrollment for co-management as well. I want to enroll my clients into Intune as well. Oh, come on. Yes, thank you. All my devices are managed by Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager. Recommended. Again, sure, seems fine. I'm going to upload everything. I'm not going to limit it to a specific collection. What's kind of interesting about this is you can end up with servers getting uploaded into the environment. It's kind of weird, but it can happen. And I'm going to go ahead and enable analytics. I'm going to go ahead and say, let's go ahead and enroll all. Now, you may not want to do all in your environment. You may want to choose a pilot collection. You may want to choose none or whatever. I'm going to go ahead and choose the all button, And I'm also going to go ahead and do this. Hold, please. Give me 1 second here. And grab this guy. IBCM. Somebody's bringing up IBCM. I did leave out IBCM on here. I left it. I've actually have had the fortune of building IBCM. I should have mentioned that. You're very good point. I've run that before actually at a hospital I used to work as well. Yes, control mouse wheel. Where I've had to do that before. So yep, I'm also familiar with that one. And again, it's basically your own on-prem version of CMG. But yeah. Oh, come on. No, you're not gonna let me have my zoom? Really? All right, hang on a second. Trying to get my zoom it to go, and it's decided that it won't for some reason. Okay, that's too much though. Also too much. Zoom it, sir. Great. All right, well, sorry, I will, I do have a video. I apologize for the size of this. Zoom it's not cooperating with me, and I'm just going to keep going through, and I will make sure you guys get the chance to see the video afterwards. And I'll see if I can figure it out as kind of we're going along here. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and choose all for this one, and then hit next. Now we get into our slider land here. And then from here, we can go ahead and choose Windows Update Policies. I'm just going to send my Windows Update Policies over here to Intune. I'm going to go ahead and not actually do it for my environment here. But if you were in an organization where you wanted to slide patching over to Intune, you just go ahead and click it over to there. And then hit Next. Next. And you're done. Fantastic. Good. So you guys can do control and mouse wheel. Okay, cool. For some reason, it's not letting me do it when I'm sharing, and I don't know why it's doing it to infinity zoom there. And if we wait for a few moments here, this will go ahead and finish through. Now, one of the cool things about this, one of the things I checked in there that you may have missed, is I actually clicked the button to basically start the tenant attach feature, which is going to go ahead and start uploading all of my device objects into the endpoint management thing. And once that's all said and done, then I'll be able to start managing my devices. And that's it. We're done. We've configured co-management, and if we had slid the slider over there to the Intune side of things, we would have been all set, good to go, ready for patching. So let's jump back to our friendly neighborhood slideshow here because I canceled it after a second ago. So, and I'll make sure that you guys get a link to that YouTube video as well. So now what? Now how do we patch from here? Because we can't patch necessarily with Config Manager from here, right? So we have our friendly Intune update rings. Now, what's really nice about the Intune update rings is we kind of get 2 for the price of 1 here. We patch the same way with Intune and with co-management. Use the exact same solution. And what it is, what's really nice about this is that inside of the update rings that you have that are out there, you have a couple abilities that you actually don't get in Config Manager, or at least not without doing some weird stuff. One of the big ones is you can pause updates if they go wrong. Now you can do that if you have if you're using phased deployments. Not a lot of people are using phased deployment with automatic stuff yet because ADRs don't allow you to do phased deployments. And I still see people using more ADRs than I see people using phased deployments. But what Intune updates ring give you the ability to do is they give you the ability to pause updates if they go wrong. They also give you the ability to roll updates back if something goes wrong. One of the tricky business, though, is that scheduling is based on patch release. It's not necessarily based on patch Tuesday or based on any particular schedule. And then we'll go over a little more of that in a second here. And again, the other nice thing is it has the ability to natively apply feature updates. I say natively as in it really was designed from that and built around that from the ground up. Config Manager has continued to add on and get better and better at that with servicing, as well as by adding features into the update thing, everything else like that. The one big thing, though, in shifting to the co-management world, especially if you're coming from Config Manager, is that reporting is different, shall we say. Reporting gets kind of weird with how you do it. Yes, you can do it. There's some new features that are coming out. They've started to add some new things in public preview as well around it. And I think Adam Gross also has some fancy ways to do pulling in some data from Power BI as well on how to do that. So we've talked a little bit about the feature update rings, and I've claimed that they're relatively easy to set up. So what if we just did that instead of just talking about it? Seems reasonable, right? So if I go ahead and I pull over my handy dandy window here, I've gone ahead and I've already logged into endpoint.microsoft.com, and I'm going to go to some devices. I'm going to come down here to Windows 10 update rings, and we're going to go right on ahead and create one. Create a profile. Say Windows 10 patching. Super important. Go, go, go. Give it whatever description I want. The only thing that's required here is name. I recommend you do a meaningful name, not necessarily like what I've given here, which is super important. Go, go, go. Maybe something like IT or dev or prod or whatever. And we click next. And then we have our controls here for which serving channel you'd like. What's kind of cool about this is you can actually set up rings for things like the Windows Insider rings and for the different builds as well, as opposed to just using the regular standard patches. I'm going to go ahead and choose semi-annual channel. I want to allow Microsoft product updates and Windows drivers. This is super great. And then we get down into where I was talking about in scheduling. So when it says quality update deferral period days here, the important thing to remember about this, where it has this 0 here, is the 0 is not the number of days from patch Tuesday. 0 is the number of days from the patch's release. So that means that if a patch comes out on patch Tuesday and we put in 2, it would come out and it would become due on Thursday. But if a patch releases on Wednesday, it would become due on Friday. It would become available and start its install process Friday. And if it was released on Friday, it would be 2 days after that. So that means if a patch ever gets re-released, this is just something to be aware of and cognizant of in the back of your mind. Same thing is true for feature updates down here. And of course, we have our ability to how long we would like to be able to roll back a feature update here. I'm going to go ahead and set this to be, let's go ahead and wait 15 days. And we'll say that we'd like to be able to roll it back for 30 days. Seems reasonable. User experience settings. These have been updated recently. If you haven't looked at it, if you have just kind of set some rings and set it and forget it, I suggest you come back and look at these because they actually have added some new features in here as well on how you would like to install them. We've got better scheduling, a little bit better control, and a little bit better maintenance window timing and stuff like that. I'm going to go ahead in this case and I'm going to choose, you know what? I don't really care. It's my laptop. If I'm in the middle of a presentation like I am right now in a reboot, well, it's my fault, right? So I can go ahead and choose this one. I'm going to choose, let's do scheduled time. Every week, let's do every week, and we'll do Sunday because I'm typically not using my laptop too terribly much at something like 9 p.m. on a Sunday. Next, we have restart checks. These restart checks are really nice. They let you do special things for users if they're running on battery. It checks to see, is the battery level at 40%? Are they currently presenting? Are they in a Skype call or a Teams call? Currently doing something like that. And if they are, maybe we shouldn't reboot. You can also skip it and just say, no, I don't care. Let's go ahead and reboot it anyways. You can also present the option to allow the users to pause the Windows updates. I'm going to go ahead and disable that. I want to force Windows updates. I don't like giving options to skip updates. And you can leave the option to check for more Windows updates or disable them. I'm going to go ahead and leave it to enable. And I'm also going to require a user's approval to dismiss the restart notification. Something that was talked a little bit ago, actually, the toast notifications is on if we want to allow users to see them or not. Brian Dam, buddy of mine, you've probably heard him speak before. We always joke about the fact that, well, we have 3 different monitors, and, you know, when it's a little tiny toast notification, it's over here on my third monitor screen that you guys can't see what I'm pointing at. It's over here. I don't see that. I don't really look at my laptop where that screen is for my laptop over there. I don't look at it. So when a toast notification pops there for 15 seconds and I miss it, then it's just kind of like, eh. On the other side of that, though, if we say yes, now it forces it. It's there until I click the OK button, and then it goes away. And then, of course, we've got our time frame for reminding users to restart. You've probably seen, if you guys follow me on Twitter, Jordan the IT guy, you'll probably see me about once a month. I post a picture of either in my config manager lab or something else about patching, how I've got this big blue box all up in my face. In config manager, it's your little tiny white dialog box if you're not using toast notifications. In Intune, it's a big blue bar across the middle of your screen. It's pretty hard to miss. And again, we've got all of our reminders here. And of course, we can set our deadline settings. Now, I'm going to go ahead and hit Next. I'm going to create an assignment. I'm going to use selected groups. Select groups to include. I think I've got a Windows 10 pilot group over here somewhere. Yep, Windows 10 updates pilot. Select. I didn't have to choose that. I do. You could use a dynamic group here if you wanted to as well. I'm using devices here, and you can exclude groups as well if you've got certain machines you'd like to exclude. Let's say that you're a factory floor. This is one I hear a lot of the times is that, oh, we've got a factory, we got these certain machines, they can't patch, they can't reboot, so we can't move to Intune this, that, or the other thing, or we can't use these co-management settings. Well, surprise. If we configure things around, what we can do is we can make double sure. One, we don't deploy the co-management settings where we use the pilot options to only enroll devices that we want to use this style of patching. And then option number two is we can actually exclude devices in a group and then prevent those patches, even if somehow they got co-management settings, we can exclude them from being able to be included in the patching ring. And then we click Next. We review our settings. And we go ahead and click Create. And we're done. Bam. We've got an update ring here. We've got our date settled out and everything else like that. All done. All set. Now, if we want to do this with a few more times, we can create a couple more with a couple of different day settings and structures like that. But why bother? It's patching. You know, it usually works. Usually. So what about the other option, though? We talked a little bit about co-management. We talked a little bit about Intune. Now let's go back to our middle option here, which is our friendly neighborhood CMG, the Cloud Management Gateway. Well, the cool thing about CMG is that if it's what you're used to, most likely, it's exactly like what patching on-prem is like. It lets you allow different downloads from different locations, and it gives you those same granular patching options, and it's the full configuration manager feature set. The extra bonus on top of that is it's not just for patching; it's also for other things. Now, the big challenge, the big challenge here with co-management and cloud management gateway is you have to have a way in order to get the clients to be able to come back and talk to the on-prem environment. If you can't find a way to get the clients to talk back to the on-prem environment, they can't find out that there is a new configuration manager gateway. They can't find out that there's co-management settings that they need to get in order to figure out how to deploy those patches. So, with all of that being said, the very first question that most managers ask whenever I'm talking about cloud management gateways is, okay, but I've heard there's cost. Anything that goes into Azure is there's got to be cost associated with it, right? All right, so of course, show me the money always comes up. All right, well, first things first, let's talk certificates. Certificates is almost always the hardest part of doing a config manager implementation. Typically, when I do a config manager implementation with a CMG with a gateway is about a few hours to actually build the CMG, and it's like 3 days to deal with certificates half the time, because you got to have the back and forth with the customer, you got to have the back and forth with security, and everybody wants to figure out this, that, and everything else how it is. And at the end of the day, you can end up with a solution that's 0 for PKI or using EHTTP to 150 for a public certificate or to some crazy absurd number. But if you go with the cheapest option, it costs $0. Then we got to configure the Azure subscription for the CMG application. Just means enabling a couple of features inside of it. That's free, right? Then we've got to go ahead and we've got to create an Azure Service Connection. Okay, well, that's free too. That creates our actual application inside of Config Manager. And then we need to actually create the CMG and provide the authentication path. That means create the actual VM in Azure and then get the certificate uploaded in there. That costs about $70 to $90 a month. And this is actually a picture from my lab. I'm running this. This is about 15 different machines that are all using CMG. My office is way that way, 6 miles. My config manager environment's that way, 6 miles. And I'm currently home, and all my clients are running off of CMG, and that's my current cost for CMG for patching and everything else like that. So, I mean, and then you install your connection point, configure the management point to use the CMG, and this one gets missed a lot of the time. I have had several different troubleshootings. Is remember that you actually have to enable the management point for CMG. Configuring this up for CMG. Now I say configure, but again, it's just a couple of checkboxes, and then configuring client settings. This is the other common one that I see. Now, a lot of people shy away from in default client settings, making the changes in default client settings to configuring them to be able to use the cloud management gateway or to use other cloud services. I strongly encourage you to look at configuring a default client settings, and the reason is because if you ever have to deploy the client through Intune or something else like that, you want them to get the first default set of client settings that they pick up to be the ones that tell them to continue to talk. To the environment and to properly register with the cloud. So all in all, what does this mean? At the end of the day, you can come up with a way to manage your clients for about $100 a month. And now I know you're probably thinking, yeah, but that's only for your 10 clients. Okay, there's an article, a really nice article that's done by a guy named Johan Aronmark. If everybody here is probably familiar with that name, right? I actually helped collect some of the data, and we talked about it a little bit back then. But there's a big blog post out there about a bunch of companies of different size, all the way from 0 out to here. About 10,000 to 500 and this, that. The price really doesn't change much past that $100 to $150. I mean, you can get all the way up into $300, and that was still in the 10,000 and 20,000 client range for that. So it really is an affordable option. If you think about it and you put it this way, the cost of this for a month, if you've got a Verizon cell phone plan, if your company provides you with a cell phone, right? It's the cost of about one of these a month. A Verizon unlimited cell phone plan is about $100 a month or something like that for unlimited phone, unlimited home. A CMG to manage most, if not all, just from a management now, right? Not pushing AutoCAD or something at it, but just the cost of this to manage it is $70 a month. That's a pretty good insurance plan for always being able to manage those devices and to always be able to patch those devices. So, what about some deployment tricks with this? So how do we keep costs down, or how do we ensure them? Well, one, patching is then they come from Azure when they get distributed from the CMG. They're free, right? They don't actually cost you anything. There was a whole big thing about that at Ignite 2 years ago, I think it was, where they don't charge you for data egress cost from Azure for patch content. However, there are some other tips and tricks when it comes to deploying patches when clients aren't on-prem that are good to know. So the first one that I want to show is if we come in here to software library and we come here to automatic deployment rules. If you are familiar with deployment rules at all, we've got all of our friendly neighborhood settings inside of our ADR here, where if I can get my ADR to load, creating a software update group. We've got how we deploy content, what we do with software updates, our evaluation schedule, alerts, language selection, and then deployment package over here. Now you might notice that I'm using this little shiny option down here. I don't download content for my patches, my workstations. I tell all my clients to go get it from Microsoft. That means that I don't care if you're coming in on VPN or anything like that. I don't care where you're coming from. Just go get it from Microsoft. I don't want to be your patch repository for you. Now, this is a good and bad thing. It's kind of a balance between the two. What this means for you is that exactly what Robert's put in here is the same. It's the exact same set of data files. The good and the bad about it is just in whether it's going on your internet connection versus going on your internal WAN connection. This can be a huge savings for you in the long run in terms of what network utilization you're using. The other one that's important that's attached to this is if you come in here and you look at how deployments are actually being deployed, there's one other little tricky one here. If we come down here to download settings, there's this shiny little checkbox down here at the bottom. Now, a word of caution on this one. If software updates are not available in a distribution point in current neighbor or site boundary groups, download content from Microsoft Updates. If you happen to be a global company, this is a fantastic checkbox, but if you happen to be a global company and you are trying to distribute updates to weird locations like, say, I don't know, Asia, China, Korea, anywhere over there, and you have a very small WAN link, there is entirely the possibility that that package will fail or in some way, shape, or form not distribute. And as a result, the clients will then need to go out to the internet and get those updates. Fine, great. However, if you require those clients to backhaul through the WAN before they go out to the internet, big problem. This setting is great as long as you're not in that hub and spoke configuration where clients have to come back into the network. The same thing is also true for clients on VPN. If you have clients on VPN that are at home today, like myself, right? I'm not on VPN. I don't have a VPN. I'm cloud native. But if you have clients that are at home and they are on VPN and they all need to come back into that VPN, and this checkbox is here before they go out to the internet, well, they're not going to go out on my internet connection. I'm going to go out on your internet connection. And so is everybody else on the client from the data center there. So those are just kind of a couple of really quick little things that you can do to help avoid some content things and help force the content or the clients to download content from the locations that you want them to download it from. Okay, and if we go back here. So, of course, the next question that people always ask is, can you do it cheaper? Well, the answer is yes, we can. If we configure co-manage, we go back to it, our price is $0. Our price then for configuring tenant attach is $0. Our price for validating client settings and making sure they're properly configured so that they actually enroll properly and everything like that is $0. And our price for deploying co-management settings to all the devices connecting via VPN is $0. Enrolling devices in Intune is also $0, assuming that you have your licensing set up the modern way and everything like that. Licensing is weird. And all we have to do then is just enroll patch rings and enjoy. Off we go. We're done. We've already done that. We did it in 5 minutes or less to build an update ring, right? It's very simple to do it, and it's cheap. It's free. So what about the third scenario, though? What about the few customers, the few people in the room that have had the unfortunate thing of all the clients went home and there's no way to get them? There's no VPN contact. Well, there are a few ways that you can deal with it. Some of the ways that you can deal with this is you can go through the really painful process of calling those users and helping them enroll the devices in Intune. One of the other things you can do is you can create enrollment policies using conditional access to try to force those devices to enroll in. When a user goes to use one of the services like Outlook or something like that, that it forces the device to try to enroll because otherwise it just doesn't work. But then the other piece of that, the other side of that is what about the case of a security event? Now what? What happens when the desktop that we didn't have a good management footprint of necessarily, or maybe it did have a good management footprint, it was on VPN. What happens when that desktop gets an email, downloads something bad, and then spreads it to everybody else, and now we got to reimage it? So fortunately, there are ways. Now, Config Manager has started to do this now, but let's assume we don't even have Config Manager at this point. It's been encrypted. It's shut off somewhere. So how do we deal with it? We can do things using cloud-based reimaging, using a product. Well, it's product, but it's free. It's out there called PowerShell Deployment Toolkit, where you can actually build a server that lives in Azure, allows you to download and reimage a computer, and force the device to immediately enroll in Intune. Now we've gone straight to a chicken dinner. Winner, chicken dinner. Right straight to it, right? We've skipped all the immediate steps. Our device is in tune. It's ready to be registered, right? But what if we can't? What if for regulatory reasons we can't just stop there? What if we have to get the device back to an on-prem management solution? We can handle that. All we need to do is build an on-prem VPN server. Once we've started recovering an environment, we start to kind of recover it. And once it's done, if we build a PKI infrastructure, we can deploy certificates to those clients using Intune and using it. We can deploy our config manager agent to those machines as well. And then without the users ever coming back into the office, completely remote, right? That machine got reimaged, joined to the cloud, brought up as a modern machine, modern device style of management, had a VPN, an always-on VPN solution built for them with split tunneling, deployed their certificate to it, and has the agent on it. It's fully managed and all on Azure, all without ever coming back into the office. Fantastic. So what about last kind of thing here? So what about reporting? I mentioned earlier on that reporting in the Intune and kind of in that world is a little bit weird. So what can we do from a reporting perspective to find out in a world where we don't necessarily have config manager? Maybe we don't have the time to try to figure out how we deal with figuring out desktop analytics or trying to collect the data or fiddling with that. Maybe there's another place we can get some data from. So how many people here have started to tiptoe into configuring or enrolling devices in Defender ATP? Give a show of hands here. Let's see what we got. Got a few people. Yep. Fantastic. All right, so we got quite a few people that have enrolled their devices in Defender ATP. So one of the neat things about Defender ATP, and I'm gonna kind of pull this one up here, a little example here. I have a few devices here that are sitting in my Defender ATP, and one of the cool things is if you come into the device inventory, you can actually come in here, you can click it, and you can find out all of the missing KBs that are missing from the machine, or all of the discovered vulnerabilities. Apparently, I have patched that machine, so that was apparently a bad example. Come back here. We go to this. Let's try this one. See if this one's missing any patches. Hey, look, this one is missing January patches, probably because they just came out. So it's missing January patches. I can see this. Now, this isn't so bad for me with having to click through like 5 machines, but what if I needed to get a very fast chunk of information from all of these machines and find out what are all the patches or what are all the vulnerabilities that are on all of these machines floating around out there? Well, we can find that. So if come over here, go to Portal Azure, we can actually go ahead and we can come into our portal, and if we go to not Azure AD Active Directory conditional access policies, that's not what I wanted. Go back. Fine, don't go back. Go to app registrations. We can go ahead and we can create a app registration, and we can give it API permissions to access the Defender ATP API in here, and give it the ability to read these vulnerabilities. That then gives us a secret key. And then what we can do, if I come back over here, ATP has built into it this nice little tool called an API Explorer. You can actually query and see and figure out what type of vulnerabilities are going on here. But again, we got to log into a portal. It's not very automated. You know, I really don't want to have to log into a portal, run a thing, give it to a manager every day, right? So, but it's an API. That means we can query it, right? Sure, we can. And I'll make sure that this ends up somewhere along the way as well. But there are a couple of different ways that we can go ahead and we can query the API. So what this is here is this goes ahead and it builds us our resource token in order to query into the API. It then queries a URL inside of there, which is the API URL, for machine vulnerabilities and pulls back every single vulnerability for every single machine by object ID gets pulled back. So I'm actually going to go ahead and run this here. Then I'm going to go ahead and build our little response. And do these two here. And now at this point, we have inside of this response.content chunk every single vulnerability for every single one of the machines that I have in my environment for every single possible thing that's in here. So if I do response.content, and then if I pipe that into convert from JSON, it comes back in a little bit better format. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've mashed this data together here in this little itty bitty tiny piece of code here to output this shiny list of every single patch that's missing on every single device, the CVE number for that's related, and where applicable for Microsoft patches, the KBE that's missing. KB that's missing. So patching.
I have a question.
I have an answer.
Why not? But so a lot of Microsoft patching is based on the cab, right? But other patching tools I've seen are based on like DLLs and things like that. So what do you think about that?
I mean, I guess it depends on where you're trying to go or what you're trying to accomplish in the patching space.
Like Big Fix will like do a check and it will like list or scan every DLL. So if there's a DLL that was old on an application, that could be like a something you exploit. So it seems like other tools do a deeper dive based on other factors like DLLs versions than just the WSUS scan and cab.
So it depends on what you're hunting for. So in the event of, because now we're kind of crossing in between patching and patches that are installed versus threat hunting and risk assessment. Okay, so there's kind of two separate split things here. So let's attack them from two different sides. From a patching side and a patching perspective, are vulnerabilities deployed and are there vulnerabilities or is there a patch that can be installed? That's the goal of what we're trying to determine when we're doing something with a cab file. We're trying to find are there patches that we should install or are there patches that are missing from here? However, from a DLL perspective, such in like what you're talking about with Big Fix or anything like that, they're looking for are there DLLs on the machine?
Scan and be like, hey, you have this DLL, and it's like, okay, well, I don't have a patch to deploy, so
right, and that's where we're getting into the space of these are threats. These are threats. They're risk vectors, right? There may not be a patch for that. The patch for it may well be remove the DLL or delete the file that got left behind, right? They're kind of two separate splits between two separate things. On the one side, one is finding machines that are missing a patch and missing something that has a remediation, and the other one is finding pieces that are left behind, finding possible exploits using pieces that have been left behind on a machine. That kind of answers the question there on that. I mean, yeah, one is a scanning for risks.
At that point you should just like do a something like just delete them or something like that?
It depends on what it is, but yeah, you're gonna have to figure out would have to be handled on more of a case by case basis. I'm trying.
It's like a ghost DLL just hanging out. Like, why is it there in the first place, right?
Exactly, it shouldn't be there. It should be cleaned up or gone by part of your reimaging process or something else.
Gotcha.
Yep. Part of your normal hygiene.
Haha.
So patching, that's pretty much the kind of the tail end of what I have there for talking about that. So what we've kind of covered here is the three different scenarios or the three different states that we had starting at the very beginning of all of this. And then we went into how can we kind of sort of fix some of those, some different ways. We can either build the CMG, we can enable co-management and move our clients to Intune, or we can do some other tricky business with CMG with how we want to deploy patches to minimize impact on WAN. And then we talked a little bit about what can we actually report on and what can we report on in a case of last resort when we don't necessarily have data from a config manager database or we don't have data from desktop analytics or anything like that works again in that real-time sense of finding out what vulnerabilities are where and how we can kind of dig that information out. Any questions?
I just think it's like a risk factor thing. That's something you have to account for. Yep. Like how much are you willing to spend money-wise on something that's not really a big thing?
Where did our moderator run off to? Any other questions?
And Jordan, will you be making this available to the group here so I can get it on our website?
Yep, absolutely. So I have two versions of that little kind of script there. I'll be posting a blog post probably tomorrow. I'll get you the script so you can make it available on the website. I'll also be posting a blog post probably either tomorrow or early next week on how to use that script and another version of the script that I wrote, as well as how to set up the API key. with the permissions that are needed to kind of go a little bit more in detail, so you don't have to kind of try to scratch your head and figure out from weird script to API permissions on that. So, and I'll absolutely make the presentation available. Yep.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions for Jordan?
Got a question.
Go ahead.
For feature updates, have customers been going the route of a task sequence through a CMG or a feature update?
Yes. So it depends on who you talk to, and it depends on what you have in an environment. So in the more modern and the more streamlined, I say modern loosely, right? But the more applications you have that don't have weird or strange requirements or weird bad things going on with them, the easier it is to do them with a just a feature update, either over the internet or using a regular update or anything like that. The less you have to worry about it. Again, that comes back to the idea of simplifying your OS and simplifying what you have on a machine. For example, deploying a feature update or using the servicing model or something like that for a machine that was just is somebody that works in sales and they just travel, they mostly do all their work via on the internet. There's no reason to not do a feature update straight up over this. It's just like a regular home user PC. For the most part, they're just using a web browser. They might have one or two apps, right? And again, it comes back around to, but maybe for other devices that you have, let's say you have engineers who have a big, beefy engineer that they take home and they develop big projects and they've got weird software like AutoCAD that's 32 bits and this, that, and the other thing on it. Those ones need more of a task sequence style approach where they need to have more examination done and more preparation work done in the background on it to make sure that. So as to which way they're going, I would say for the most part, it's still task sequences for doing feature updates. It's still a lot of the doing a lot of the prerequisites of it. Stuff like what Gary Block is doing. It's a lot of stuff like what Johan is doing, you know, figuring out how all those pieces kind of work and then doing the feature update versus just doing a feature update. I do have a couple of customers that all they do is they just push straight out. They just let the feature updates roll. They just let it roll. And they've been pretty happy with it. But again, those are typically very much so companies that are very, all we use is an internet browser and we use a few, you know, SaaS with software as a solution service type stuff. That answer your question?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Or actually, going on to that, is there a way to split the OS package to be native Azure or to still be taxing our egress?
So let me make sure I got this right. Is there a way to put the OSD package in Azure or
like use the normal CDN rather than your tenant's egress?
That's a good one. I don't know. If you shoot me an email, I will find out though and see. Unless somebody else has an answer for it, I'll see if I can find an answer for that. But if you shoot me an email, I'll put my email in the chat here afterwards, and I will find out for you.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Okay, sorry, I'm going to scroll up here. It feels like there's a couple of questions in the chat here. When you move the workload from Config Manager Intune for updates, have you seen an issue where feature update policies, if you block, are not honored? I have not been, but I haven't specified or I haven't specifically dove into that. So it sounds like the question here is if you move the workload from Config Manager Intune, do you see an issue where feature update policy blocks don't get honored? I haven't seen that be a problem. I haven't tried that specifically and then tracked it to see, but I have not seen it, nor have I heard of any reports of it from any of my customers having a problem with that have moved to that. Again, I'll do some digging and double checking on that just to make sure. I have not sent a link to doing the reimaging over the internet. The reimaging over the internet is still relatively new and it's out there. However, I will make sure that I link to the...
Brady has a one that's really good with the work group.
Yep. I will get a post to that. It's something that we do pretty regularly as part of our response team stuff. But we have the link to it. It's public. It's out there. It's on GitHub. Yeah, I think that's all of them. Cool. That looks like it's all there.
Okay. George, do you have anything else, sir?
I really appreciate the ATP part because like a lot of people like don't consider security, so that was really good. And I went to a TrueSec meeting like in 2005. 2006, I think. Very smart people.
Thanks. And that's all I've got.
All right. Any other questions for Jordan? Okay. Well, for you people who stayed for the entire meeting, have I got a treat for you? Patch My PC wants me to do a raffle for you all. This is for a $500 Amazon gift certificate.
Jesus Christ.
So I see some people's already made some comments on that. Yeah. So yeah, this is for a $500 gift certificate from Patch My PC. We really appreciate it, I should say. And we'll go ahead and get this going here.
I have
share
heard
this out.
because this like so much good information and stuff like that. Like that's crazy.
Okay, let me get this shared out here. I'm sure everyone wants to see this live. Okay, the code is 1543. That's the PIN number, swagit.io.
Wow.